What's going on, everybody? It is a Monday, and Monday means the day where I talk about all of your comments on my question from last week. And this is a fun day for me whenever I do these videos, because reading through the comments is a lot of fun. And again, another week of great responses. To be honest with you, when I do these videos, the hardest thing for me is deciding how do I choose? Because if I were to just read every response, then I would be reading responses for 45 minutes, and which I guess would be okay. But I like to kind of try to group them into some sort of themes and commonalities and share some of my thoughts on the responses. So a lot of great responses. I'm going to share, I'd say maybe 8 or 9 here of some that really kind of stood out to me. Now, as always, I encourage everybody to share their thoughts on whatever the question for the week is. And I think that it's just a great way for the community to kind of grow together, learn about each other, see that there might be people in the community that have common interests, but also different interests. And that's a strength, you know, when we have different interests and there are people who collect like us and people who collect differently than us, that's what keeps it fun. And there is a wide variety, there are a wide variety of answers in this week's question, which, if you remember back to last week, it was, what is your favorite, most meaningful pickup from the month, from this past, what is your most meaningful pickup from this past year? And what is a card moving forward before the year ends that you'd still like to try to grab? So to say there were some really cool pickups is an understatement. Let's just go ahead and see some proof of that right here. My friend Dave says, that was probably my favorite among the videos you have produced. Regarding my favorite pickup this year, it has to be the 1915 Cracker Jack Joe Jackson card in an SGC 7 that I just won in the Golden Auction. I have the Cobb, Wagner, Mathewson, and Johnson cards from that set, and this completed my want list for that set. I prefer the SGC holder for these cards because they really make the Cracker Jack cards pop. It was very well centered, and that is very unusual for this card. It has a pop count of 2. It was at the top of my want list, so I took the plunge. Greg and Darren both encouraged me to go for it. Any future purchases will have to wait well into next year, but that's okay with me. My friend Tony says, this was a fantastic video. I almost always comment on your videos and missed commenting on the one you talked about today. I have so many reasons that I collect now. The biggest surprise blessing of my return to collecting has been making friends like yourself. Collecting has enriched my life that way in a huge manner. The answer to your question this week is a hard one to answer. I love all my pickups from this year, LOL. The one I couldn't part with is my 1917 Boston Store Joe Jackson. With a pop count of only 10, I would never replace it. I love that card because of the image, the scarcity, and who is on it. The card I am still hoping to land by the end of the year is the 1952 Topps Jackie Robinson. I am being extremely picky, though. I want the right copy because I respect him as a person and player so much. I have been thinking about what my next YouTube video topic would be. You helped answer it with yours. I will revisit my childhood collection and all the warm memories it brings me. And finally, great video, Greg. All the comments and your added commentary sum up my sentiments about our hobby. I was fortunate enough to pick up several cards this year, but my favorite is probably the 1912 Ty Cobb T22-7 Miners Extra variety. The one I'm still chasing is the 1933 Gaudy Babe Ruth number 149, the Red Ruth. But it's probably not going to happen this year. Realistically, I'm probably done until January. The chase is at least half the fun. Sometimes I get a little bit speechless, and I know all of you are thinking, you're never speechless, Greg. But sometimes I literally feel speechless at some of the responses. Now, let's just walk through what we just heard. Now, my buddy Dave, goodness gracious, a lot of us probably saw the absolutely incredible Joe Jackson Cracker Jack that was for sale on the Golden auction. It made news. People were sharing about what an amazing card it was. I saw it on multiple different YouTube channels. And then my friend bought it. He's the owner of it. I mean, it is a absolutely stunning card. Now, if the name Dave sounds familiar, yeah, this is the same guy who I met at the National. We've become friends and we text all the time now. And he shared some of his collection and it was absolutely incredible. And he mentions in the comments some of the other Cracker Jack cards that it's going to fit in nicely with, which I showed on my video at the National. Now, Dave is a really, really good guy. He's a great guy. And I'm really glad. I mean, connecting with people like Dave has made this hobby so much more fun for me. And there are other people that we're gonna see their responses to. And my friend Tony, Southern Collector, his pickup. My goodness, a Boston Store Joe Jackson. And we've got two really, really special Joe Jacksons that people in the midlife community were adding to their collection this year. That is absolutely incredible to me that those cards are owned by people that I know, let alone people that I'm friends with. And then the third one, the T227 Ty Cobb, that's an awesome card. I mean, an amazing card. And first Dave says, yeah, I'm probably tapped out for a little bit for the rest of the year. I totally understand, my friend. You got one of the nicest cards. In my opinion, the Cracker Jack Joe Jackson is one of the most special cards on planet Earth. And you got one of the nicest copies on planet Earth. I mean, the centering on that card is fantastic. And same with, and then Tony, Tony says, yeah, I picked up this amazing Joe Jackson and he's picked up a lot of awesome cards. If you're not subscribed to my friend Tony, Southern Collector, I'll put his information on the screen here. Great guy, amazing collection. And the history that he likes to learn about the players and the cards as he's picking them up is really, really cool. And he loves to share that. I'm going to have him on the channel soon. We've tentatively talked about setting up a conversation where we could kind of talk about his collection and how he collects and stuff. And that will be coming soon. And then, he's like, well, I also want the 52 Jackie Robinson before the year ends. I have a feeling he might get it. Then the third one, it's like, I want a red Gaudy Ruth. But again, I love that comment at the end that was mentioned there. The very last comment, the very last statement, which is the chase is at least half the fun. I mean, how true is that? How true is it that the chase is part of the fun? If I could just literally have 100 cards that I want, and I had an endless supply of money, and I could just say, I'll take one of those, I'll take one of those, I'll take one of those, I'll take that, and they were all available. And you don't ever have to look for them or hunt for them or wait for them or bid on them to make sure that you win the auction. You could just literally pick them all up right now that wouldn't be that much fun. Isn't the fun part searching for it, searching for the right one, searching for the one that has the criteria that you want, researching and the connecting of the dots that leads you to that card. You know, the story behind the acquisition. When you can remember how you got a card, and it wasn't just, it popped up on eBay and I bought it. But it's actually, well, I knew this guy and he knew I was looking for it and he connected me with this other guy who had one. And so we talked on the phone and then we met at the Strongsville show or whatever it is. You know, I went to this dealer and he had one and we negotiated it and he had just gotten it from this guy. The story of how I got the card is what gives you that added value. To me, there's an added value in that. When you're simply just buying and acquiring, but it's not like my friend Dave who knew, he told me at the National, Golden's going to have this really nice Cracker Jack Joe Jackson. I'm going to go for it. I really want it. I saw it. It's beautiful. I'm not going to buy anything between now and then because I'm going to go for this big card. And then I was texting him throughout the process and as he was bidding and then I texted him after I saw that it closed and I said, "Did you get it?" And he got it. Very cool. The chase is absolutely part of it. And that's one of the special things about these cards that we just mentioned here, that these three big pickups from these three awesome collectors is it's not just the card that they got. It's the card that they got is so special and so rare that it took a while to be able to obtain it. It took some patience. It took some strategy. It took something special, which makes the card and owning it even that much more special. Now, let's take a look at another response that really caught my eye, and I'll explain why here. But first, let's take a look. This one says, "To answer your questions is a combo answer from me. My favorite pickup of the year is the one I shared in your March pickup video. It is the 2022-23 Bowman University Best Basketball Caitlin Clark Auto Gold out of 50. Ironically, I got this one when I was chasing the blue at a 150 of the same card. The blue is now well out of my price range. I picked up the card raw. It will stay raw and in my collection forever. I really enjoyed this video. It was particularly fun answering your question and then hearing you walk through all of the answers. I have to admit, I am starting to have a flashback as a collector. I distinctly remember being very disenchanted in the early 1990s when the card manufacturers started flooding the market with cards. I am feeling it again. I also feel it from the grading side of the hobby. We have entered the junk slab era. Crazy. Your videos keep me grounded, so thank you for all of your content. I hope someday I can thank you in person, just not sure I will ever make it to a show big enough to cross paths with you." All right. This response really stood out to me. And there's a few reasons why it stood out to me. Number one, the reason it stood out to me is I tend to think that a lot of people out there that tune in to this channel, they are all vintage collectors and they're obsessed with vintage cards. But here we see someone who picked up a really big ultra modern card of an ultra recent phenom in Caitlin Clark. And I think that that's great. I mean, I mentioned on the intro that it's very cool to see diverse collectors in a community. If everybody who showed up had the exact same opinions about the exact same cards, about the exact same grading companies, about the exact same price points, it wouldn't be interesting. But knowing that there are people in the community who are buying everything from Joe Jackson Cracker Jack cards right? And Babe Ruth cards and Jackie Robinson cards to Caitlin Clark golds. That's fascinating to me. Now, the other thing I like about this is that he says, well, my original plan was I was actually chasing the blue. And the blue one out of 150 was my goal. And then I came across the gold, which is a better one. And so I pivoted. And sometimes I think that there's sort of a lesson to be learned there. Is that sometimes if we're laser focused, if we're too focused on a single pickup, if you go to a show and there's only one card that you are really, really looking for. Now that happened at Strongsville with my good friend Darren of Return to Collecting. He showed up at Strongsville last year and there was one card he was really after and he went through the whole room and it wasn't there. There was not a single copy of it there. And he was like, I don't know what to do. I came here thinking I was going to buy this card. And he was like not sure how to proceed. And he's at an awesome show with a bunch of his friends. And he's like, what do I do? Well, eventually he ended up pivoting and he bought some really, really cool cards. But it took a minute. And I think that we want to be focused. We want to be focused on what we're collecting because otherwise we just end up buying a bunch of stuff and get so sidetracked that we don't end up with the stuff that we actually want, right? If your want list is so big, do you ever get some of the things that you really want? That's kind of an issue. At least it's been an issue for me. There are times that I don't end up buying things that I really want because I'm kind of filling up the bathtub with the plug out because I'm kind of adding these other things I'm really not as interested in, but it prevents me from filling up the reserves enough to get the card that I really want. But I think you also can be so focused on just the one card that you forget about other opportunities that might present themselves. So and this is just my take. This doesn't mean that it's right. But I think the way to go is to be kind of focused, but open. And you can be too open and you could be not focused enough. But I think this is a good example of, well, I was looking for this, but then this other opportunity presented itself. And so I went for it. And I think that he made a really good decision by doing it because it sounds like he got a really cool card. My friend Don says, second, too. Great video, Greg. You touched on everything collecting is all about. Next week's question. The number one card this year for me by far is the 1888 champion N162 Beecher that I was so fortunate to buy from Orlando at Strongsville. The card I haven't yet a chance to purchase is the 1965 Joe Namath rookie in the butterfly variation. Don't think it will happen this year. I have had a few setbacks, but there is next year. Thanks for all that you do. All right. Now, one of the things I love about this particular response, well, first it's my friend Don. Don's a great guy. I met Don at Strongsville where this deal took place, where he bought this Beecher card, which is a very special, like the first football card. I mean, arguably the first, I don't know if it's even arguably. And the card is gorgeous. And the card came from my friend Orlando and his friend Orlando. And so he bought the card off of Orlando. And they didn't know each other at the time. Orlando was at Ash's table and they were going back and forth and Orlando was looking to sell the card because it was his backup. Orlando has two of the Beecher cards, had two of the Beecher cards. And this one, he decided, I'm going to sell it, free up some cash. I don't need two. And so he was looking to sell it and he was showing it to Ash and they were kind of going back and forth. And I know he sold a different card to Ash a really nice King Kelly, I believe, to Ash. And then Dawn kind of overheard him. And then, Dawn was watching, and Dawn was interested in the card. I mean, it was a beautiful card. And he went up to Orlando later and he said, "Hey, I saw you had that Beecher card. I'm interested." And they ended up working out a deal. And Dawn was like, "This card's going into my collection. I've wanted it. This is one of the ultimate. I mean, this is probably a top 5 vintage football card." And he said, "This is going to be in my permanent collection. I'm not going anywhere." And then they struck up a friendship. And then Orlando ended up doing a video on Dawn's collection at Strongsville. And now they're pals. And then I ended up buying a couple Sammy Baugh cards later in the show. And on my left was Dawn, and on my right was Orlando, because they were kind of hanging out and stuff. And I like how there are times that some of us will have cards and we may not need that card anymore, or maybe we shift our focus, and then we can sell them to each other. A collector to a collector transaction, that's pretty cool. An end user, or was intended to be an end user, to the next end user, or person who is able to appreciate it, the end appreciator of the card, is awesome. And these are two great guys who are able to make a deal, and through making the deal, made a great friendship. And I'm all about the friendships, as you guys know. I mean, this whole video so far has been about a bunch of my friends that I've made along the way. And I've made all of these friends over the last year or two. But selling to each other, and that's one of the beauties, I guess, of Facebook, and maybe I need to do more of that, is instead of selling the card to somebody who's then going to sell the card, selling the card to somebody who's going to keep the card, that, I think, is more special. And I love that about this whole situation, that this transaction didn't just result in Orlando's beautiful card going into Dawn's amazing collection, but it also resulted in an awesome friendship as well. This next one comes from my dad, and he says, "When the year started, my expectation was that I would get a 56 Mantle. It was my favorite semi-attainable Mantle card that I wanted so much. Mid-year, I landed a beautiful example in an old SGC 6-holder on eBay. With half the year left and an impending visit to this year's National coming, I naturally had to come some pie-in-the-sky new Grail cards. I talked to Greg about it and said the Mantle that I'd really like to have is the 53 Topps Mantle. It was a Grail card, which means I may not even get it in my book. An opportunity presented itself while sitting with friends to get the card, so unexpectedly I got the 53 Mantle too. If a 57 Mantle, a 53 Page, or a 59 Gibson met my eye and price standards, I would likely pull the trigger in what remains of this year." Now, there's a few reasons I wanted to share this one. First, it's my dad. That's my dad's comment, right? And with my dad's collecting, I get to hear him I'm kind of a sounding board for him at times. And he'll call, I'm kind of thinking about this. What do you think about this card? I don't know if I want to spend this much money on that. And so we're constantly kind of sharing thoughts with each other. So I've seen my dad and the turmoil of trying to decide whether to step up and buy some cards or not along the way. And he bought an absolutely gorgeous 56 Mantle. And the 56 Mantle that he got went under comps. And I think the reason it went under comps is because it was in an old SGC label. Now, there's this whole thing about grading companies getting tougher. And I do think that they're grading tougher in many instances now than they were 20, 25 years ago. I do believe that. But that doesn't mean that every card that's in an old holder, whether it be PSA or SGC, it doesn't mean it's not a beautiful card. It doesn't mean that the grade doesn't hold up. In a lot of cases, the grade still holds up. And so my dad got this really good deal on this 56 Mantle. I mean, it went well under what it should have gone for because it was in an old holder. But if you look at it, it absolutely deserves that grade that it got. So if it really comes down to, and you know, it's the old saying, and we've said it over and over, and we've just absolutely beat the drum with it, of buy the card, not the grade, then that goes both ways. It goes when a card is overgraded. It goes when it's a card that was graded 30 years ago, and now it would no longer get that grade. And it also goes for the card that got the grade that it deserved, but it's in an old holder. And it also goes for the card that was undergraded. You know, the card where it got a 4, but it looks like a 6. Now, are those mistakes? Maybe. Are those opportunities? I think so. But the other thing about it is it's not just mistakes or opportunities. There are a lot of times that technically the grade is the grade for a reason. The question is, do you grade on technicalities? Do you grade on the do you collect on the technical grade, or do you collect on how a card looks to you? Because if there's a little indentation on a card, we'll say, and you can't even hardly see it, and it doesn't bother you, you don't notice it, but that's the reason it's an 8 instead of a 10, I think that maybe that's a card to target. So that's the first part about that that I wanted to point out with my dad's comment. The second part is, you know, I've been trying to get him to loosen up his purse strings with his cards. I'm like, Dad, buy some cards. You can afford the cards, just go buy them. And for the most part, over the last few years, he's got this thing where he likes to make money from cards and then use that money on cards. So it's like, you know, when you go to Las Vegas and you're up $1,000 in chips, you might play the $50 slot machine instead of the nickel slots a few times because it's the house's money. And he loves doing that. But I also think there are times it's okay if there's a card that you really want to have to step up and get it and seize the opportunity when it presents itself. And so when we went to the National, he had some gold cards on his list, and he had a list of things that he was going to try to acquire. And it was sort of the far-fetched one was the 53 Mantle. It wasn't really on his radar until literally we were hanging out with some friends, and it literally fell in his lap. Like, literally just looking through some friends' cards. And he said, yeah, I'm thinking about moving these. And one of them was the 53 Mantle. And then he said, and he actually did it. And sometimes, you know, you might say, I don't really want to spend the money. But then you do, and you're glad you did. And I kind of think that's what happened with my dad here. I think that he was like, man, I don't really want to spend this much on a card, but he did, and it's a beautiful card, and I think he's glad that he did. My answer to this week's question is ironically not my most expensive pickup, the Gretzky rookie. My favorite pickup was an 85 OPC box bottom Mario Lemieux rookie, my logo card. I never knew this card existed as a kid, and the color match looks so good in an SGC slab. This year, I would still like to get a Rickey Henderson rookie. In 1987, I traded mine away to a dealer at a show, for the then super hot 86 Donruss Rookies set that I couldn't afford at the time. In hindsight, I wish I still had that Henderson card. It is one of the last iconic cards I need from the 80s. This next one says, my favorite pickup from this year that isn't leaving my collection is the 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. I ripped so many packs as a 12 to 13-year-old kid and never pulled one. All of my friends had at least one. Now I have mine 35 years later. The card I'd like to add before the end of the year is the 58 Topps Hank Aaron. I've come close to winning some bids, but have decided I'd prefer to buy it in person. This would be a big purchase for me. Fingers crossed the small local card shows will have one soon. And lastly, Andrew says, my favorite pickup so far is the George Brett 1975 Topps Mini rookie card. I know it's not a super rare or scarce card or anything like that, unless it's in a 9 or a 10, which my copy is not. But the reason I like it is because it's also a card that was one of my dad's favorite cards during his younger years nearly 50 years ago. I think when it comes to the 70s decade, it doesn't have as much hobby love, at least not from what I see on YouTube. Though when we think of the 70s decade and some of the great cards and players of that era, Brett is one of those iconic names, and I do think the 75 Topps is one of the last truly creative and innovative designs. The 75 and 71 Topps stand out to me, and I think it's just pretty cool having a card that maybe my dad or his friends back in the day would have had too. For a card I still have not picked up, but I want to, is the 1955 Topps Sandy Koufax rookie. There's one more card show in my area before the end of the 2024 calendar year. We will see what happens. Great video. Thanks, Greg. So many things I like about this. These last three comments are all about nostalgia and memories, right? They're all about nostalgia and memories. It's about, oh man, I traded away my Ricky Henderson years ago because I had to have the rookies set. And I wish I hadn't, and I want to go reacquire it. And the memory of that trade, right? And the memory of getting rid of the card. And then, that was a long time ago. But still, I got to get one back. Like, there's so much nostalgia there. The nostalgia about the 75 mini George Brett. Like, that's so great. That's so great that part of the appreciation is not just that it was one of the last really creative sets that Topps did, but it's really like one of the rookie cards from the 70s, if not the rookie card. Certainly in the top 3 or so, right? And one of the players from that era. And then the connection to, well, that's when his dad was collecting, and that's when the thought of, his dad pulling cards just like that. All of that is really, really cool. And the nostalgia part of collecting is such an important part, as we talked about last week. I personally think that the nostalgia is one of the most enjoyable parts of the hobby from an observer's perspective. I love hearing stories about other people collecting cards through their life and remembering certain deals that they made and remembering certain cards that they pulled out of packs and remembering the trades that they made, or the card, even if it's not an important card, even if it's a card that's not worth a lot of money, the memories that we have from our childhood, and maybe it was pulling a Kevin Moss rookie card, or a Todd Van Poppel, or a Walt Weiss, or who knows. But nonetheless, that is a special part about the hobby, is that nostalgia. So buying the 84 Fleer Update Kirby Puckett, or buying, whichever card from your childhood you always wanted but never did, is something that is extremely special about this hobby that I don't think a lot of other hobbies have. There aren't a lot of other hobbies where you can sit there and you can reminisce and share stories about the time that you made a trade or bought a card or traded a card away or pulled a pack that had a special card. Like, that's something pretty special to card collecting. And to me, I think it's pretty awesome. So with that, my question for this week for all of you is, what is the one memory of a card that you acquired or traded that is the one that you think about the most? Now, maybe it's a card that you bought at a show. What was the card? What was the show? What did you pay? Maybe it was the card that you traded away. What did you trade away? What did you, maybe it's the best deal you ever had. Maybe you went to the garage sale and they had a stack of tobacco cards and you pulled them out and one of them was a Walter Johnson. Maybe it was you opened a pack as a kid and you pulled the 84 Topps Don Mattingly rookie card, and that memory is just stuck with you forever. So that's my question for this week. What is the one memory? What is the one story that is the one that is most memorable to you revolving around this hobby? I look forward to hearing these. I really look forward to hearing these. And I hope that you'll consider leaving a comment, sharing the story down below.